G'day YouTubers, and thank you for tuning into today's voting video on YouTube. I don't usually tend to start off my gardening backyard tours or my backyard gardening tours like that. Usually I tend to do this, walking past towards a couple of sheds and that summer house. Well, actually this here is a tool shed and that there is the old abandoned looking summer house. But what I'm really after for is the condition of the nasturtiums and see how they've been affected by the heat and also the other one, of course. But also, let's have a look at what else I've grown so far. And strangely enough, I'll come back to these later. These are potato seedlings in which I've decided to grow, which is quite unusual and somewhat far-fetched. So much so that I would never ever think of my potato seedlings starting to grow like that. Wonder how developed or undeveloped these potato seedlings are going to be like. I don't know, I'll just have to wait until autumn. That's the only issue of these things. But the main thing I'm going to be talking about is, of course, my backyard garden. Of course, it's this section right here, where everyone is highly familiar with. I've been planting a lot of those Oppenheim cabbages, which will be fairly amazing. There is a bit of a stumbling block with these cabbages. Yes, I'll talk about these later on. But first off, let's take a look at the rest of my backyard garden. So I've got a lot of potato seedlings, some of which are starting to approach nearing their end cycle, in which in that case they might look like as if they are starting to dry up. And of course, yes, they are coming out towards their end cycle, because not only the summer has been very relatively dry, but also, if we think about it, hey, the growing season is nearly coming to an end. But we've actually got some fantastic news along the way. So I've been actually editing out my bigger and healthier pumpkin seedling, which is not on the plant pot, but this one right here is by far the one that I've been dealing with the most successful wise so far. So good. And as I can start to see, man, look at that pumpkin that I've just grown. It's still green, but I'm hoping for it to, basically flourish its way in. I don't have to water it like once or twice a week a day, I suppose. So I could probably add another coating of water onto it. But just because I can probably put up as much water as I can, especially on a hot and a warm day, doesn't exactly mean it's going to be that effectively great. I need to check my pumpkins every single day. Or every single time of the day. Obviously I don't have to water them around the afternoon. It's probably best to do it. It's always best to do it either in the morning or in the evening. And it's very much well said, I suppose, hey? Just before the cover of darkness. One problem I've encountered is that I can start to see some white speckles on the pumpkin leaves themselves. And there's the fruit itself. I have basically rested that thing onto a wooden, let's just say, plank. Obviously it's a plate-like plank. And of course, yes, hey, something very nice about the way I start to, look at how my pumpkin is growing, seeing how good or bad it is. I don't know, it's a fairly fantastic and very complex, let's just say, subject in that matter. Talking about how pumpkins grow, how they really need to be raised, and how you really need to rehabilitate with pumpkins and things like that. It's fascinating. I really do love growing my pumpkins. But yes, I'll take a look at the leaves themselves. They're suffering what is supposed to be, oh sorry, there's a creaking door, mildew. So mildew is, of course, a fairly common problem in pumpkin leaves. And I have to say, hey, when you think about mildew, they often tend to look like this. But in reality, they actually look a bit more like this. So basically, when you have leaves that look more like this is probably a sign that either the pumpkin has not been doing so well, or whether on the fact that, hey, yes, I must have been putting up so much fertilizer on that other pumpkin plant, which is the one that's been planted directly underneath the ground, well, onto the ground actually. Not underneath the ground, sorry. Why in the hell am I talking rough and readily these days? But yes, this pumpkin seedling here has endured a bit of mildew. And yeah, it's not looking that great. So what I can do is, of course, I don't have any baking soda or vinegar or anything like that to cure it, of course. I mean, that's the thing about pumpkin seedlings. They just straightforward get mildew at any given time, even after a healthy, good amount of watering, of course. I think today is a bit of a cooler but still warm sort of day. I think, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday will still straightforward feel hot, I think. That's the one gripe behind this. But nevertheless, my pumpkin seedlings have been doing so good so far, as I can really start to see it, hey? I think I need to upload as many videos as I can before the end of the year. Oh, and what is this? Another plant pot. Sorry, plant pot that is. It's been laid underneath the ground for quite some time now. And for me, I might as well just have to pretty much ponder my way through, because I want to try and, you know, basically be very careful of what I'm doing here at the moment. And I've accidentally killed and squashed out this thing. So I've just accidentally stepped and stomped into that area, of course. And that was a new pumpkin area here. I think I might as well just have to leave that pumpkin seedling alone, because it's developing its fruit, and if I keep on pruning some of these bits away, it might actually worsen the effectiveness of how this pumpkin is going to be like. Because, you know, if I leave intact this thing here, if I leave this thing intact, it will actually successfully develop all of its nutrients, its sugars, and its growth, not only just from the water itself, but also in the way it builds the sugars, and also, well, not just the sugars themselves, but also the nutrients it gets. You know, I've been feeding it with lots and lots of, you know, liquid fertilizer, organic liquid fertilizer, which is obviously the most, if not all, common ways of doing so. It's a slow releasing fertilizer, and it also accelerates the rapid growth of plants. Of course, this actually happened to the same thing with my tomato seedlings, about 2 of them, of course. I don't know, I always put kitchen scraps, liquid fertilizer on them. Obviously, that's the most common thing. And this plant pot here that I've been using is going to be fairly interesting, because, hey, I've been using that for growing lettuces. But I'm now going to go ahead and show you what else I've been planting so far. I'll talk about the lettuces later on. So I've got the big tomato seedlings. As you can see, hey, that is somehow very amazing when I start to see this, which is really good. Of course, I've got 2 of these bigger sized tomato seedlings. The one on the right is probably by far the biggest. There are some pepper seedlings, which I don't think they're really going to flourish that nicely, because, hey, I mean, it is quite a warm day outside, but I don't think they're going to really produce the fruits that I initially thought in the first place. Well, I could have done it during spring, but I think, you know, early to mid-May was actually quite chilly, so I wouldn't recommend planting these. I would have done it as far back as late May. I would have done a very much better job in just timing on that. But anyways, we've got more peppers being grown like this. I think they need a growth period of about 4 to 5 months to really fully mature. But I think as I get towards autumn, I don't think they're going to really succeed very well. There's a lot of sunflowers. As you can see, this one here has finished off its flowering cycle. And there is another pumpkin seedling, but also at the midst of it, there's even more pumpkin fruits being developed so far. And the way the pumpkin fruits, in the way that they develop, is quite fascinating. I can actually start to see one that has actually started to build quite a lot of nutrients and things like that, which is actually very nice to know. I do have to try and get rid of many of the weeds. I mean, look at the vines. That pumpkin vine has started to take over another plant. Is that like a thistle or something? That's very incredible and strange to know. But I'm going to go ahead and have a look at the rest of how everything is like. There's a lot of background noise and things like that. And wow, is that a sunflower? Oh, wow. Holy crikeys, that is actually very interesting, quite charming, I suppose. So, as strange as this sounds, apart from getting 6 sunflowers, well, one of them unfortunately died, I've now got 7 sunflower plants. That is actually highly incredible. I've never ever seen a sunflower this small and, you know, this size. Hey, this is actually very unusually small and very skinny looking. Mind you, if I had one sunflower that was planted early on in the season, I would have been a very happy camper, but boy oh boy, I've already have done it. There's some 2 pumpkin seedlings which have already been planted and transplanted so far. I'll just go ahead and straight forward do a jump cut. And yeah, as I've just been doing a lot of jump cuts so far, oh my crikeys, I've been stepping on various different things. There's some calendula here. I've actually had to trim down one of my calendula plants, because obviously that one calendula plant, unfortunately, yeah, it had one side of it that was like crippling a bit. Anyways, I'm just going to go right ahead and start. You know, I do have to be very careful if I'm treading over things like, you know, pumpkin seedlings and, you know, different plants alike. So we've got some nasturtiums. Very interestingly, this one here, I could tell you what, not that much in the way of flowering when compared to the other side. I'll tell you what, my nasturtiums have been a very big safe haven for bees and other pollinators like butterflies and wasps and hoverflies alike. And I'm now going to duck down to take cover, because I want to show you the tomato plants as well too. These plants have been doing very good as well. So even though it's been very relatively dry, I've been constantly watering these plants for a long period of time. As you can start to see, hey, Look at these beautiful looking yellow flowers. They have now started to really transform into these beautiful, miraculous looking red fruits themselves. Well, actually, they're not yet red, but I'm actually looking at them as green, because yes, they are already green because they are raw. In order for them to get very ripe, we need to get as much hot weather as we can over the coming week, over this week, of course. And yeah, we need more warm or hot days for them to really get ripe, which would be very fantastic. And the way I rehabilitate and raise these crops, I'm going to deadhead the calendula a bit now. So yeah, my backyard garden's looking fairly massively intense. There's another sunflower that's also about to blossom on top of that already fully mature but straightforward, slowly dying sunflower. I tell you what, hey, so many sunflowers so far this year. It's been very incredible, and amazingly, these sunflowers have been doing so well in the heat that yes, they are also very drought tolerant as well too. So hey, who knows? They could really start to reappear next year, but I don't think I'll be planting that much as I would normally think I would be. Maybe it could be just a sunflower-free backyard garden. Who knows about that, I suppose, hey? I've got more pumpkin flowers, lots and lots of nasturtiums, and man, oh man, I tell you what, every time when I look at my backyard garden, it's just a merry mix of calendulas, nasturtiums, and sunflowers. They are just everywhere. I tell you what, I can really tell you what, my backyard garden is a massive size magnet. I'm just creating a giant oasis for all different plants alike. This is just rapidly wild. It's just so fantastic, and the way I'm growing things makes it so simple to really get my way through. It's just so awesome, I have to say so, hey. And yes, there's more calendulas. Very interestingly, do you know which plant which hasn't really got through so far so good? It's the broad beans. They have really been a massive failure. Well, actually, they haven't been a failure to me, because actually the best success from these broad beans was their crops I've been waiting for. And I tell you, I've been planting another big size calendula on that plant pot as well. I've actually got so many calendulas. I tell you what, my calendula army has now ended so far this year. I could get some more for next year, but hey, I'm not sure if I'll be planting that much. Maybe I could probably sow them directly during, let's just say autumn or winter, I suppose, say, because quite often when it comes into calendulas, you don't often tend to think of them as a plant to sow them during winter, although I could probably say so otherwise. Maybe I can just do this thing called cold stratification. Could that really set things up in a very nice way? It could do, because calendulas come in different various, sizes, and the way they seem to grow also depends on the cultivar or breed. But anyways, we've got more pumpkin seedlings, and there has been quite a few pumpkin seedlings. This one here has been badly affected. You can see it's actually started to get rotten. I don't know why, which is not very nice to know. Probably because I must have actually placed it, probably because that pumpkin seedling must have been developing its fruit a bit too sooner in like soil or wet soil, which is not very nice, because quite often when you put them into like wet bits of soil, or quite often when the pumpkin is formulating on wet bits of soil or damp pieces of soil, it gets rotten so easily, and that's the only problem behind pumpkins. They don't really get very much, let's just say perfectiveness in the way they start to be formulated. And there you go, there's some more nasturtium seeds being disposed or dispersed, which is fantastic. And the way they disperse all of the seeds is just quite miraculous. Now I'm going to go back and show you the lettuces I've grown so far. I will be able to try and, basically plant as much lettuce as I can. And as I'm looking around, yes, I've been feeding, I've been offering birds and other animals with some water. Some of them have been quite contaminated with like leaves and dirt and soil and compost and, yucky things around here, which are not that very nice. But at least I'll straightforward give the animals a good space for them to drink. Because, it is going to be a very hot week, obviously approaching towards the low 30s. The low to mid 30s. I wouldn't say high 30s, obviously, I suppose, but it could be possible. I've also been growing some lettuce. Now, the one key factor about lettuce is that they are very vulnerable, and I know I'm planting these for autumn for this year, because when it comes into lettuces, they are really going to actually struggle, because so I've placed them in a very relatively shaded area away from the midday sun and also from the extreme heat waves, of course. I think from the from the direct sunlight. Obviously, it doesn't have to be direct, and it doesn't have to be, you know, strong. But what I'm on about is, hey, depending on the time, I'd say the morning sunlight, the morning sunshine is actually much more better than just having to deal with, you know, afternoon sunshine. Because if you have afternoon sunshine, it may cause some significant problems to the lettuces, and they will start to bolt, and then you'll obviously get like a very nasty and bitter tasting lettuce. So that wouldn't be very, very nice. But what it can do in a very positive and beneficial way is to actually make them themselves into like seedlings, which is fairly nice to know. Lettuce is actually quite a fairly simple and easy crop to grow. I've known that so many times, I suppose. They're very easy to grow in so many ways, but very vulnerable, and they're usually comfortable at like temperatures of like 21 to 24 degrees Celsius, but not when it's like over 25 degrees Celsius. And then we've got some more cornflowers right here, and look at the masses of cornflowers, and they're actually starting to produce so many buds, so much so I would say, hey, that has been a very big utter success for that plant. That is just wonderful to see. Right, I'm just going to go down a bit more, I suppose, and I might also want to talk about the cabbages. So yes, the strawberry plants have basically stopped producing. They will have to wait until next year to produce more, you know, fruits and things like that, flowers and fruits and things like that. So let me just straightforward end here. And I know there's music in the background, but I'm nearly about to end my video here. So that's a very good time for me to straightforward move on to something else. So in order to talk about the cabbages, now I know I'm growing these for, well, let's just say 2026. But what I didn't even realize was that because I actually planted these guys at around late July, around the 25th of July, these cabbages are actually going to be ready for next year, which unfortunately I wouldn't be looking forward to. So for me, you know, the problem about these cabbages is that they actually seem to grow relatively slowly, or at a very low metabolic ratio. I think this low level of metabolism during winter time, and let's just say in November, it does sort of kill off a bit somehow, but they are prone to getting a bit vulnerable of bolting themselves on a relatively mild autumn. So they are quite fine growing during this time of the year. But I think I would have been much more happy if I would have planted cabbages during, you know, let's just say spring, in order for my autumn harvest, or, you know, it would have been much more better. But unfortunately, I've just done it a little bit too late. But yes, I think to talk about the cabbages, I'll just go ahead and talk about these guys. These are only just about, you know, a couple of weeks old. They're not even that big, but of course, yes, hey, that's the thing with cabbages. They may seem to be like that, but then, hey, that's what it is. So in order to wait for these cabbages to actually, like, grow very, 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 very big in general, I think it's probably best for them to actually, you know, grow them. Sorry, there's a lot of music here. I can't even talk properly. Let me just do a jump cut, eh? So yeah, I think the real problem with cabbage seedlings is of course, yes, I think if I would have harvested them as early as, like, let's just say during Christmas, or let's just say around October or November, obviously I got a funny feeling, hey, it's only just going to be like leaves and leaves of cabbages, which is not going to be very effective. If I wanted to get the fresh cabbage hearts, then I would have actually been waiting for at least around, I would have said February or March of 2027, so it would have been that time for them to pick them guys out, you know, for my spring harvest. But yeah, it does sort of depend really. But I'm just going to harvest these guys after, you know, just before the end of the year. So hopefully that should be quite good, I think. And there's a lot of drill noises and stuff. And this pumpkin overall here, as you can see, has been doing very, very good. I want to try and leave it as it is. I can try and water it. I'll try and water that guy if it gets really, really too hot. Obviously, because, you know, pumpkins really require lots and lots of water. And I've also been adding fertilizer to my pumpkin plants as well too, because, well, they need a lot of it in order to accelerate and boost exponential growth for their fruits and the ripening time as well. And also, let's not forget to mention, when it comes to the mildew, whenever I see leaves like that, basically with the mildew, it does sort of affect the growth and the taste of the pumpkins themselves. So it's very well worthy to know of how I actually start to, like, grow my pumpkins and stuff. I am going to straightforward, like, turn them just a bit. And there's also a bit of a misconception. So as we all know, the flower part is actually at the bottom of where you hold the pumpkin fruit itself, and the top part is actually where it's at. It's actually from here. So this top part here is actually where, you know, the stem of the pumpkin is. And maybe when it gets nicer and, well, let's just say orange-ish, it should actually become nice. Although I'm starting to see a bit of discolorization here, which is not very, very nice to know. But I'll leave it for the time being, hey, because I want to try and let this pumpkin grow. And I would probably refrain from touching it because I want to try and, hey, leave the pumpkin as it is, as it's starting to grow and formulate itself. Hey, there'll be even more pumpkins along the way as we get in towards September and October, although it's a very long way off because we are enduring some very relatively hot and dry conditions at the moment. Still no signs of rain, but I am looking forward to see some rain. But when exactly during this year is a big uncertainty. August is very relatively going to be an exceptionally dry month for England and Wales, most notably in the south and also the central parts of England. If you live in northern England, that's great. That's very, very nice to know. Because, you know, getting lots and lots of rain is fairly essential. Obviously, we need all that rain for us to really grow stuff and also to keep everything alive and lush, green and fertile. That's it, isn't it? Anyways, I'm going to leave this video right here. There's a lot of noise outside of my backyard garden, so I'm going to leave this video as it is. If you really enjoyed it, please give this video a very good like, subscribe for more flat videos in the future. And as always, thanks so much for watching and bye for now.